My 4-year-old daughter was burning up with a 104-degree fever, crying weakly against my chest. Instead of calling for help, my mother-in-law ordered me to stay in the kitchen and finish cooking for her wealthy guests. When I grabbed my keys to leave, my husband blocked the door, slapped me across the face, and told me to stop embarrassing his elite family. I did not shed a single tear. I simply picked up my little girl, walked out the back door, and made one phone call that would send them all to federal prison. Before I tell you how I dismantled Atlanta's most arrogant family piece by piece, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to smile through the disrespect of people who thought they were better than you. The heat inside the massive kitchen of the Buckhead mansion was suffocating. I stood perfectly still by the marble island, gently rocking my 4-year-old daughter, Zuri. Her small body radiated a terrifying amount of heat. I had just taken her temperature for the third time in an hour, and the digital display flashing 104.2 degrees made my stomach drop. She was lethargic, her breathing shallow and rapid, her dark curls clinging to her sweaty forehead. Outside the heavy oak doors of the kitchen, a lavish society cookout was in full swing. I could hear the smooth jazz band playing on the manicured lawn, the clinking of crystal champagne flutes, and the loud performative laughter of Atlanta's high society. My husband's family was hosting their annual summer gathering for the local elite, a crowd filled with politicians, hospital administrators, and old money socialites. But right now, none of that mattered to me. My baby was sick, and I needed to get her to the emergency room immediately. I reached for my purse with one hand, balancing Zuri carefully on my hip, when the kitchen door swung open. My mother-in-law Vivian marched into the room. She was 62 years old but carried herself like a queen who demanded absolute submission from everyone in her presence. She wore a pristine white linen suit that probably cost more than my first car, her hair immaculately styled. She did not even glance at her sick granddaughter resting against my shoulder. Instead, her sharp eyes immediately darted to the massive industrial stove. "The seafood gumbo is not finished," Vivian snapped, her voice cutting through the heavy air of the kitchen. "The mayor just pulled into the driveway, Chloe. I specifically told you he expects his bowl to be served the moment he sits down. Turn that fire back up and stop standing around." I stared at her in disbelief, tightening my grip on Zuri. "Vivian, Zuri is burning up. Her fever is over 104 degrees. I am taking her to the emergency room right now." Vivian finally looked at Zuri, but her expression did not soften even a fraction. She let out a loud, exaggerated sigh of annoyance. "Children get fevers all the time, Chloe. Do not be so dramatic. Give her some children's medicine and put her to bed upstairs. You are not ruining this event for us just because you cannot handle a little sniffle." "It is not a little sniffle," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear for my child and boiling rage. "She is completely lethargic. I am leaving." Vivian stepped closer, her perfectly manicured finger pointing directly at my face. "You should be grateful you are even allowed in this house. My son saved you from your mediocre working-class life, and this is how you repay us. You are acting exactly like the ghetto you came from. Selfish, disruptive, and entirely lacking in class. You will put that child upstairs, you will finish stirring that pot, and you will walk out there and serve our guests with a smile. Stop embarrassing this family." For 3 years I had swallowed her insults. For 3 years I had played the quiet, submissive wife who lacked ambition and simply rode the coattails of her wealthy husband. I had let Vivian mock my background, insult my intelligence, and treat me like the hired help because I had a much larger mission. I needed access to their world, to their safe, and to their financial records. But my undercover assignment ended the second my daughter's health was on the line. "I am taking my daughter to the hospital," I said, slowly enunciating every single word so there could be no misunderstanding. I grabbed my car keys from the counter and turned toward the back door leading to the garage. Just as my hand reached the door handle, the kitchen door swung open again. This time my sister-in-law Jasmine walked in, followed closely by her husband Brad. Jasmine was the undisputed golden child of the family, 30 years old, entitled and deeply insecure underneath her designer labels. Brad was a 34-year-old white man who acted as the CEO of a medical supply company, a company that I knew for a fact was nothing but a front to launder the family's dirty money. He loved to flaunt his position within the black elite, acting as if his marriage to Jasmine gave him a pass to speak to me however he pleased. Jasmine wrinkled her nose, looking me up and down. "You always have to make a scene, do you not?" she complained, adjusting her diamond necklace. "You are so lucky to even be at this level of society, Chloe, and you are literally ruining the aesthetic of my party with your panic. Just put the kid in the nursery and come pour wine for Brad. He has been waiting for 10 minutes. Brad crossed his arms and leaned against the marble counter, giving me a condescending smirk. "Seriously, Chloe, you really need to work on that tone. We are hosting major investors out there. These people fund our clinics. You cannot just run off and leave the catering in shambles because you are having a minor freak out. It is unprofessional." I felt my blood turn to ice. These people were entirely devoid of human empathy. They were so consumed by their fraudulent wealth and their manufactured image that they could not see a dying child right in front of them. "Get out of my way," I demanded, stepping toward the exit. Before I could take another step, my husband Marcus stormed into the kitchen. At 35, Marcus was the CEO of his family's lucrative private clinic chain, a title he held solely because Vivian handed it to him. He was deeply arrogant, relentlessly dependent on his mother's approval, and completely emotionally abusive. He was sweating slightly in his tailored suit, clearly agitated by whatever Vivian had just texted him from across the room. "What is going on in here?" Marcus barked, glaring at me. "My mother says you are throwing a tantrum and refusing to serve the mayor." "Marcus, look at your daughter," I pleaded, holding Zuri up slightly so he could see her flushed face and glazed eyes. "She needs a doctor. I am taking her to the emergency room." Marcus barely glanced at Zuri. Instead, he looked at his mother, seeking her cue. Vivian just shook her head in faux disappointment. Marcus marched over to me and snatched the car keys right out of my hand. "You are not going anywhere," he ordered, his voice dropping to a dangerous low timbre. "You are not leaving until this party is over. You are going to stop embarrassing this family, Chloe. You are going to put the kid to bed, fix your face, and get out there to entertain the investors. Do you understand me?" I stared at the man I had married, the man I had spent years investigating, gathering ledgers and offshore account numbers for. I had known he was a criminal, a fraud, and a money launderer. But in this exact moment, I realized he was something much worse. He was a monster. "Give me my keys, Marcus," I said, my voice dropping an octave. I stepped forward, attempting to push past his broad shoulders to reach the garage door. Marcus did not just block me. He raised his hand and brought it down across my face in a violent, stinging slap. The sound echoed sharply against the marble walls and stainless steel appliances. The physical force snapped my head to the side. Zuri let out a terrified, high-pitched scream, burying her face into my neck, her small hands clutching my shirt. The entire kitchen went dead silent. The jazz music from outside seemed to fade into a dull buzz. I stood perfectly still. The side of my face was burning, a sharp, throbbing pain radiating from my cheek to my jaw. I could taste the metallic tang of blood where my teeth had cut into my lower lip. I slowly turned my head back to look at them. Jasmine was standing by the refrigerator with a cruel, satisfied smirk on her face. Brad looked highly amused, shifting his weight comfortably, as if he had just watched an entertaining sports highlight. Vivian stood tall, her chin raised, a look of absolute triumph in her eyes. She believed her son had finally put the ghetto girl back in her place. Marcus stood, breathing heavily, staring at me with a mixture of dominance and challenge, expecting me to crumble, expecting me to cry, apologize, and retreat upstairs to the nursery like a defeated dog. But I did not shed a single tear. I did not raise my voice. I did not cower. The woman they thought I was, the quiet, submissive, uneducated housewife who desperately needed their money, died right there on that kitchen floor. The psychological shift was absolute. I looked at Marcus, staring directly into his arrogant eyes, then shifted my gaze to Vivian, Jasmine, and Brad. I memorized the smug superiority on all of their faces. "You just dug your own graves," I said quietly. The silence inside the sprawling kitchen became absolute. The only sound left was the ragged breathing of my 4-year-old daughter clutching my neck. I tasted the unmistakable metallic tang of blood pooling in the corner of my mouth. Marcus stood inches away, his chest heaving under his suit. He expected me to shatter. He expected me to drop to my knees, beg for forgiveness, and apologize for disrupting his mother's precious event. Vivian stood by the stove. Her chin lifted high, a triumphant gleam dancing in her eyes. She wanted the working-class girl put back in her place. Jasmine leaned against the marble island, adjusting her diamond bracelet with a satisfied smirk, while her husband Brad crossed his arms, looking thoroughly entertained by the violence playing out before him. For 3 years I had played the submissive wife. I had allowed Vivian to mock my public education. I smiled politely while Brad made condescending remarks about my neighborhood. I washed Marcus's clothes and ignored the late-night texts on his phone. I endured it all because I needed proximity to their clinic ledgers. But my daughter was burning with a 104-degree fever, and her father had just slapped me for trying to save her life. The undercover operation was over. The submissive wife was dead. I did not shed a single tear. I wiped the blood from my chin with the back of my hand. I looked Marcus dead in the eyes, stripping away every ounce of the meek persona I had worn for 3 years. "You just dug your own graves," I said quietly. Marcus blinked, his arrogant posture faltering. It was not the voice of a defeated housewife. It was the voice of a federal informant who had enough evidence to put him away for decades. I adjusted Zuri in my arms, pressing her hot little face against my collarbone. I turned my back on them and walked straight toward the heavy doors leading to the main terrace. "Chloe, get back here right now," Marcus demanded, his voice cracking as he realized my trajectory. "Do not you dare walk out there looking like that. You will ruin everything." I did not stop. I raised my right foot and kicked the double doors wide open. The doors slammed against the exterior brick, instantly killing the music playing on the lawn. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward the veranda simultaneously. Atlanta's socialites, hospital board members, and local politicians froze with champagne flutes halfway to their mouths. I stepped out into the blazing afternoon sun. A bright red handprint was blossoming across my left cheek, and a fresh stream of blood was dripping from my split lip to my chin. I walked right down the center of the manicured lawn. I passed the mayor of Atlanta, who stared at my bleeding face. I walked past the hospital chief of staff, who quickly stepped aside. The whispering started instantly, a wave of shocked gasps and frantic murmurs ripping through the elite crowd. Vivian rushed out onto the terrace behind me, her pristine white suit suddenly looking utterly ridiculous. "Everyone, please, it is just a misunderstanding," she announced, her voice pitched artificially high with sheer terror. "My daughter-in-law is just feeling a little unwell." Marcus ran down the stone steps trying to catch my arm. "Chloe, stop!" he hissed through gritted teeth, terrified of the powerful investors watching us. "People are staring. You are destroying our reputation." I yanked my arm away from his grasp so violently he stumbled backward onto the grass. "Do not ever touch me again," I said loudly enough for the front row of guests to hear. The crowd gasped again. I kept walking. I marched straight through the iron gates of the estate and down the long driveway. The black SUV I had requested through the Uber app was just pulling up to the curb. The driver took one look at my bleeding face and crying child and immediately jumped out to open the door for me. I slid into the back seat, pulling Zuri onto my lap, and locked the doors. Marcus reached the gate just as the vehicle began to pull away. I watched through the tinted glass as he slammed his hand against the wrought iron fence, his face twisted in fury. He thought he had lost control of his wife. He had no idea he had just lost his entire empire. The air conditioning inside the vehicle was a sharp relief against the oppressive Georgia humidity. I pressed a cool cloth to Zuri's forehead, murmuring soft words to keep her calm. Once she settled, I unzipped the hidden lining of my handbag. I pushed aside the commercial smartphone my husband paid for and monitored. Reaching deep into the lining, my fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled out a heavy encrypted burner phone. I turned the device on and dialed a memorized 12-digit number. The line rang exactly twice before a voice answered. "Sterling," I said immediately, tasting the salt of my own blood as I spoke. It is Chloe. Agent Sterling's voice came through crisp and intensely alert. Chloe, what is your current status? The status has irrevocably changed, I replied coldly. They crossed the line. The physical abuse has started and my daughter requires immediate medical intervention at the emergency room. My cover as the submissive housewife is officially dead. I am burning it all down. There was a brief heavy pause on the other end of the secure line. Copy that, Sterling said. Are we accelerating Operation Glasshouse? I looked down at my innocent child burning with fever because her father prioritized catering a society party over her health. I thought about Vivian's arrogant sneer and Brad's corrupt company built on stolen federal funds. Yes, I said, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. Get the federal warrants ready right now. I want every single one of them in handcuffs by the end of the week. The sterile lights of Atlanta General Hospital blur past my vision as a swarm of triage nurses surrounds us. Zuri is limp against my chest, her small body twitching as she hovers dangerously close to a febrile seizure. I bark out her symptoms, the timeline of the fever, and her lack of response to the medication I gave her hours ago. The medical team works with practiced, terrifying urgency. They rush us into a stark white room, transferring my daughter onto a specialized pediatric bed. A doctor with graying temples barks orders, his voice steady, but laced with the kind of severity that makes most parents collapse in tears. I do not collapse. The physical sting from Marcus striking my face still burns hot across my left cheek, but that pain is absolutely nothing compared to the ice currently flowing through my veins. I stand back against the cold wall of the sterile room, staying out of the way as the nurses place cooling packs under Zuri's arms and carefully insert an intravenous line into her tiny hand. I watch the monitors intently. The steady, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor fills the room, and I refuse to blink until I see her core temperature begin to drop. The cooling fluids do their job. Zuri's breathing gradually slows from a frantic panic to a soft, exhausted rhythm. While the medical staff works to pull my daughter back from the brink, my personal cell phone begins to vibrate violently inside my pocket. I pull it out. The screen is lit up with a relentless barrage of text messages. Marcus is the first to demand my attention. He types with the furious, unchecked arrogance of a man who has never faced a single consequence in his 35 years of life. Get back here right now, his first message reads. You embarrassed my mother in front of the mayor. You embarrassed me in front of our investors. Bring my daughter back, walk through the back door, and get on your knees to apologize to this family. If you do not, I will lock the gates and you can sleep on the street. I swipe away his notification, feeling a profound sense of disgust wash over me. For 3 years, I played the role of his obedient, uneducated trophy wife perfectly. I let him dictate my schedule, I let him correct my grammar in front of his wealthy friends, and I let him pretend he was the generous savior who plucked me from obscurity. He actually believes I am a terrified dependent with nowhere else to go. He actually thinks a slap and a threat will force me to submit. The phone vibrates again in my palm. This time the name on the screen is Vivian. My mother-in-law never bothered with basic human decency even in moments of family crisis. Her message is a masterclass in financial manipulation, the exact tactic she has used to control her entire bloodline and silence anyone who dares to cross her. You have severely overstepped your bounds this time, Chloe, she writes. I am freezing your joint accounts and cutting off your platinum cards tonight. Let us see how a useless unemployed housewife pays a private hospital bill. Do not expect us to bail you out when reality hits you. I stare at the glowing text on my screen. She sent that message fully aware that her granddaughter was burning up with a life-threatening fever. Vivian cares more about the optics of her catered society gumbo and the opinions of her Buckhead social circle than the actual heartbeat of her own grandchild. She genuinely thinks freezing a credit card will send me crawling back to her immaculate kitchen, begging for scraps from her elite medical dynasty. She thinks money is her ultimate weapon. A woman wearing blue administrative scrubs and carrying an electronic tablet steps into the hospital room. She introduces herself as part of the billing and admissions department. As she approaches, she briefly glances at my swollen lip and the red, angry mark blossoming on my cheek. Her eyes flash with a momentary spark of sympathy before her professional training takes over. She asks for Zuri's pediatric details, confirming her date of birth and medical history. Then she moves to the inevitable protocol. Ma, I need to inform you that our hospital requires a credit card on file for the emergency room deposit and the subsequent pediatric ward transfer, the administrator says softly. Because you bypassed standard intake for an emergency intervention, the initial hold will be $5,000. Right on cue, my personal phone buzzes one last time. A notification from the banking app pops up on my lock screen confirming that Vivian has already made good on her threat. The primary accounts shared with Marcus are officially locked. The balance shows 0 available funds. The billing administrator holds out the digital payment terminal. Her expression is sympathetic but firm. She looks at my bruised face and my simple clothes, fully expecting me to panic. She assumes I am just another victim of a domestic dispute, a woman who fled a wealthy, abusive household with nothing but the clothes on her back and a sick child in her arms. She expects tears. She expects me to ask for a payment plan or a charity waiver. I look from the locked banking app on my phone to the blinking green light of the hospital credit card terminal. I lock my phone screen and drop the device back into my pocket. I do not panic. I do not offer a sad story. I simply nod at the administrator, reach past my deactivated personal phone, and slide my hand into the hidden zipped compartment of my purse. The billing administrator stands behind the protective plexiglass counter, her fingers hovering nervously over her computer keyboard. She has just stated the hospital policy regarding emergency room deposits, fully expecting me to break down. She looks at my bruised cheek, my swollen lip, and the simple clothes I threw on this morning. She clearly sees a terrified, dependent woman who has just fled a domestic nightmare with absolutely no resources. On the counter between us, my commercial smartphone sits on speaker mode. Vivian is screaming through the tiny speakers, her voice echoing shrilly in the quiet, sterile admissions lobby. I am freezing every single account right now. Vivian shrieks, the sound of her manicured nails tapping aggressively against her own phone screen, audible over the line. Let us see how a useless housewife pays for a private hospital room. You are going to be begging on the street by morning. You have nothing without my son. I do not offer the billing nurse a sad story. I do not ask for a payment plan or a charity waiver. I simply nod at her, reach past the screaming phone, and slide my hand into the hidden zippered compartment of my leather purse. I pull out a heavy, matte black American Express Centurion card. Run it for $10,000, I tell the nurse, keeping my voice perfectly level, just to be safe. The nurse blinks, looking from my bruised face down to the heavy metal card in my hand. She takes it hesitantly, sliding it into the digital terminal. As the machine processes the transaction, Vivian continues her aggressive verbal assault through the speakerphone. You came into this family as a charity case, Vivian sneers, her voice dripping with venomous elitism. You are a scholarship girl with cheap shoes and a generic degree. We clothed you. We fed you. We gave you a name that commands respect in Atlanta. You should be down on your knees, thanking God we let you marry into our legacy. I watched the digital terminal connect to the banking network. For 3 years, I have listened to Vivian call me a charity case. I sat silently at her lavish country club brunches while she told her wealthy friends that Marcus rescued me from poverty. I allowed her to believe that I was entirely financially dependent on her son's allowance. I let her think my quiet obedience was born out of desperate gratitude. She never once realized that while she was busy picking out floral arrangements and obsessing over her social standing, I was quietly routing millions of dollars of my own independently earned consulting fees into offshore trusts. The digital terminal beeps a cheerful tone. A green light flashes, signaling that the $10,000 deposit has cleared instantly. The machine begins to print the long white receipt. I lean down slightly so my mouth is closer to the speaker of my discarded phone. You gave me a cage, Vivian, I say, cutting through her rant. You thought because I grew up in a duplex on the south side, I would just sit quietly and let you treat me like a tax write-off. You called me a charity case for 3 years while I balanced your clinic books for free. The billing nurse tears the receipt from the machine. She looks at the printed paper, her eyes widening in absolute shock. The name on the receipt does not say Mrs. Marcus DuPont. It says Chloe Hayes, Chief Executive Officer, Vanguard Holdings. I take the pen from the counter and sign the receipt with a steady, practiced hand. I did not need your money, Vivian. I continue, sliding the signed paper back to the nurse. I needed your arrogance. Your arrogance kept you from realizing I never spent a single dime of Marcus's money. I have been building my own fortune the entire time. Before Vivian can formulate a response, the heavy double doors of the trauma bay swing open. A senior pediatrician with graying temples steps out into the hallway. He ignores the shouting phone on the counter and walks directly toward me, carrying a medical chart. Mrs. DuPont, the doctor asks, looking at me with professional concern. Ms. Hayes, I correct him immediately, asserting my maiden name. How is my daughter? The doctor offers a reassuring nod. The cooling protocol was successful. Her core temperature has dropped to a safe level, and she is resting comfortably. We caught the infection in time. However, she needs to stay overnight for observation and a round of intravenous antibiotics. We are moving her to a private room in the pediatric wing right now. A massive, suffocating weight lifts entirely off my chest. My little girl is safe. The one vulnerability the DuPont family could possibly exploit is now fully protected behind hospital security and a $10,000 VIP deposit. Through the speakerphone, Vivian has heard the doctor's update. You tell that doctor to transfer my granddaughter to our private family clinic right now. She demands, her tone shifting from insulting to fiercely authoritative. Do you hear me, Chloe? You have no right to make unilateral medical decisions without Marcus present. He is her father. I pick up the personal phone from the counter. Marcus lost his rights as a father the exact second he slapped the mother of his child to protect your catering schedule, I state coldly. Zuri stays here. Vivian scoffs violently, a harsh sound of pure disbelief. You are completely delusional. You have absolutely no power here. Marcus is filing for full custody tomorrow morning. With your mental state and your lack of income, no judge in the state of Georgia will give you a sick child. You will lose everything. I do not argue with her. I do not defend myself. I simply press the red button to end the call. I walk over to the large biohazard trash bin situated next to the admissions desk and drop the personal phone straight into it. I do not need it anymore. The obedient, terrified housewife they thought they controlled is gone forever. I thank the billing nurse and begin walking down the quiet, sterile hallway toward the pediatric wing to see my daughter. As I walk, my encrypted burner phone vibrates heavily in my pocket. I pull it out and open the secure screen. It is a message from Marcus forwarded through a proxy server, so it cannot be traced back to my real location. He has sent a high-resolution photograph. The image shows a legally binding document sitting on his massive mahogany desk at the mansion. It is a petition for divorce and an emergency order for full custody of Zuri, citing severe emotional instability and erratic behavior on my part. Beneath the photograph, his text message is brief and vicious. You are getting nothing. Not a single dime of my money. Not my daughter. You will crawl back to the gutter where I found you, and you will beg me to let you back in. I stare at the glowing screen as I stand outside Zuri's hospital room. A cold, ruthless energy settles deep into my bones, sharpening my focus. They genuinely think they hold all the cards. They truly believe they can crush me with their wealth and their elite social connections. They have absolutely no idea they are playing a game I rigged 3 years ago. I slip the burner phone back into my pocket and push open the heavy wooden door to the pediatric suite. The harsh fluorescent lights have been dimmed to a soft, comforting amber. Zuri is curled under a heated blanket, her chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. The terrifying heat radiating from her skin has finally broken. The pediatric nurse offers a reassuring nod as she checks the intravenous drip, silently confirming that the crisis has passed. Zuri is completely stabilized. The immediate suffocating panic that gripped my throat for the past 6 hours dissolves, replaced by a crystalline, hyper-focused clarity. I press a soft kiss to my daughter's cool forehead, inhaling the sterile scent of the hospital soap. She is safe, shielded by the best medical care money can buy. Now I can finish the job. I step backward out of the room, letting the heavy door click shut behind me. The pediatric hallway is deserted at this hour, quiet, except for the distant hum of a floor buffer. I walk toward the large window at the end of the corridor, staring out at the glowing Atlanta skyline. I retrieve the encrypted device from my pocket, bypass the biometric security protocols, and dial Agent Sterling. The line connects instantly, emitting a brief, encrypted static click before dropping into total silence. Sterling, I say, keeping my voice low and measured. The target just sent a photograph of divorce filings and an emergency custody petition. He is legally locking me out of the estate and threatening to leave me with absolutely nothing. I saw the ping on the surveillance network. Sterling replies, his voice carrying the sharp tension of a handler managing a high-stakes operation. Your emergency extraction team is on standby, Chloe. If Marcus escalates this to physical violence, or if Vivian deploys her private security contractors to the hospital, we pull you out tonight. The operation is secondary to your physical safety. Do I need to send the tactical unit to your location? Stand down the extraction team, I reply immediately. There is no physical threat. Marcus is operating purely on ego right now. He sent the divorce papers as an intimidation tactic, a swift legal strike to break my spirit. He genuinely believes I am sitting in a hospital waiting room, crying over my frozen credit cards and wondering how I will afford to feed our child tomorrow. He thinks he has completely isolated me. Sterling lets out a heavy exhale, the sound rasping over the secure line. He is arrogant, but Vivian is a different animal. If she suspects even a fraction of the truth, she will initiate the asset burn protocol. We have spent 3 years building this case, Chloe. 3 years of you playing the submissive, uneducated trophy wife to get inside their financial network. If they start shredding the physical documents, that $50 million Medicare fraud case evaporates into thin air. We have the digital footprint, but it is entirely circumstantial without the physical proof. I smile grimly, staring at my bruised reflection in the dark glass of the hospital window. I think about all the times Vivian mocked my public university degree at her lavish garden parties, loudly lamenting her son's choice of a working-class bride. I think about Marcus aggressively explaining basic accounting principles to me at the dinner table as if I were a child. They remained utterly, blissfully unaware that I am a senior forensic accountant for the federal government. For 3 grueling years, I smiled politely, poured their tea, and played the grateful charity case while silently mapping every stolen federal dollar flowing through their sprawling network of luxury medical clinics. I tracked the phantom patients, the double-billed surgical procedures, and the intricate web of offshore shell companies hiding in the Cayman Islands. They built a pristine medical empire on the backs of exploited patients and stolen government funds, using their societal influence as an impenetrable shield. Vivian suspects absolutely nothing, I assure Sterling, my voice ringing with absolute certainty. She spent the entire afternoon bragging about her societal influence to the hospital board. She is currently focused entirely on destroying my reputation in the Buckhead social circle. They view this as a messy domestic dispute with a rebellious, ungrateful wife. The concept of a federal sting operation has not even crossed their minds. They are blinded by their own classism. What about the restricted accounts? Sterling asks, his tone shifting toward operational logistics. Vivian locked the primary funds. Does that impact your mobility or compromise your cover with the hospital administration? I used the Vanguard Holdings corporate card to cover the initial hospital deposit. I explain, referring to the offshore shell company I set up specifically for this operation. It cleared instantly. The hospital administration thinks I am a high-level executive who values her privacy. They will not ask questions, and Vivian will never see the transaction on her end. My cover is completely intact where it matters. A brief silence hangs over the line as Sterling processes the tactical update. I can hear the rapid clacking of a keyboard in the background as he likely pulls up the final operation schematics on his secure terminal. The tension of 3 years of undercover work culminates in this single defining moment. Operation Glasshouse is a go. Sterling finally says, his tone shifting from cautious handler to commanding officer. The director has authorized the federal warrants. We have tactical teams preparing to hit all 14 of the DuPont medical clinics simultaneously at dawn on Friday. But the digital records are highly encrypted, Chloe. Vivian pays the best cybersecurity firms in the country to mask their illegal billing software. We need the master decryption keys and the physical accounting books to secure the federal indictments. We need the tangible proof that links Marcus directly to the phantom billing cycles. Do you have the final ledgers? I turn away from the window and look down the long, quiet hallway toward Zuri's room. My daughter is safe, recovering peacefully, behind closed doors. The DuPont family has played their hand, exposing their utter lack of humanity and their absolute reliance on intimidation. They expect me to surrender quietly. They expect me to vanish into the shadows, destroyed and penniless. They expect the submissive wife to accept her defeat. I will get them tomorrow, I reply, my voice dripping with cold, absolute resolve. Right from his safe. Morning arrives with a sharp, blinding light piercing through the hospital room blinds. Zuri is breathing softly, her fever completely broken and her skin returning to its normal, healthy tone. The door opens quietly, and Maria steps inside. To the hospital administrators and the DuPont family, Maria is a highly recommended premium pediatric nanny hired through an exclusive agency. To me, she is a former tactical medic and a fully vetted federal asset provided by Agent Sterling. I brief Maria on Zuri's medication schedule and the doctor's specific observation orders. I lean down and press a long kiss to my daughter's warm cheek. I leave the room with absolute certainty that she is guarded by the absolute best. I walk out of the hospital, slide into the back of an unmarked black car, and direct the driver toward the DuPont estate. It is time to pack my bags, and it is time to retrieve the final damning pieces of evidence. The heavy wrought iron gates of the mansion part silently as the car approaches the sprawling property. The immaculate manicured grounds are covered in a light morning dew, presenting a stark, beautiful contrast to the sterile, chaotic environment of the emergency room I just left. I step out of the vehicle and unlock the massive oak front door. The grand foyer is quiet, but the distinct sounds of clinking silver crystal and arrogant, booming laughter echo down the hallway from the sunlit morning room. They are having breakfast. They are celebrating. They genuinely believe they have broken me. They think I spent the entire night crying on a plastic hospital chair, terrified of their financial power and desperate for their forgiveness. I walk purposefully down the hall and step into the doorway of the morning room. The scene before me is perfectly, sickeningly curated. The long mahogany table is covered in imported fruits, freshly baked pastries, and silver coffee carafes. Vivian sits at the head of the table, wearing a pristine silk robe, sipping a mimosa with a victorious, predatory gleam in her eyes. Jasmine is casually picking at a croissant, while her husband Brad reviews a spreadsheet on a digital tablet. Marcus is lounging in his chair, looking incredibly pleased with himself. When they finally notice me standing in the doorway, the laughter stops abruptly. Their smug expressions shift to mild confusion. They expected a shattered, weeping woman begging for her credit cards to be reactivated so she could buy medicine for her child. They did not expect me to stand tall, my shoulders squared, my posture rigid, and my expression entirely unreadable. Jasmine is the first to recover and break the silence. She lets out a sharp, condescending laugh, her eyes sweeping over my wrinkled, dark sweater and the simple jeans I wore through the long night. "Chloe," she says, her voice dripping with venomous elitism. "You actually came back here looking like that. Is that sweater from 3 seasons ago? I suppose when Vivian freezes your accounts, you are forced to dig through the donation pile just to cover yourself? You look absolutely pathetic. You should be embarrassed to even stand in this house after the scene you caused yesterday." I do not react. I do not flinch. I let her petty classist insult hang in the air, completely ignoring her existence. My silence visibly unnerves her, but I keep my focus entirely on the grand staircase behind them. My only objective right now is reaching the master suite and opening the hidden wall safe inside Marcus's private study. Brad ignores the tension in the room entirely. He sets his tablet face down on the table, grinning widely at Marcus and Vivian. The paperwork cleared at dawn. Brad announces, a greedy, triumphant smirk stretching across his face. The new federal supply contracts are fully integrated into the clinic system. We are running the ghost inventory through the Cayman subsidiary just like we planned. Total profit extraction with zero domestic tax liability. It is a masterpiece. The auditors will never find the gap between the requisition forms and the actual shipping manifests. I stop at the base of the stairs. Ghost inventory through the Cayman subsidiary. The words cycle through my mind, locking into place like the final heavy tumblers of a complex vault. Ghost inventory through the Cayman subsidiary. For 3 years, I have searched for the exact verbal cipher they used to code the phantom medical shipments in their restricted files. Ghost inventory. Zero domestic tax liability. They are not merely double billing the federal government for legitimate patient procedures. They are fabricating millions of dollars in fake medical supply shipments, routing the federal funds directly to offshore shell companies, and then writing off the phantom shipments as domestic tax losses. Brad just casually handed me the linguistic key required to decrypt their entire master ledger. Ghost inventory through the Cayman subsidiary. The structural repetition solidifies the entire federal case in my head. I have everything I need to bring down this $50 million empire. I just need the physical drive currently sitting inside that safe. I place my hand on the polished wooden banister, ready to ascend to the second floor to finish my mission. The sound of a heavy wooden chair violently scraping against the marble floor shatters the quiet morning air. Marcus stands up, his face flushed with the same arrogant, uncontrollable rage that fueled him the night before. He snatches a thick stack of legal documents bound in a dark blue cover from the side table. He marches across the room, closing the distance between us in heavy, aggressive strides. He stops mere inches from my face, his jaw tight with fury, and violently throws the thick stack of divorce papers onto the table. "You are getting nothing," Marcus hisses, pointing a finger at the documents. "Sign them," Marcus demands, his voice echoing in the sunlit morning room. He crosses his arms, adopting the posture of a man who has just executed a flawless checkmate. He wants to savor every single second of my supposed destruction. He begins to pace the length of the breakfast table, his leather shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor. "My lawyers worked through the entire night to draft this masterpiece," he sneers, gesturing wildly to the paperwork. "It is airtight, Chloe. You are claiming zero alimony. You are waiving any right to spousal support. This mansion is owned by my mother's LLC. The clinics are protected. You walk away with the clothes on your back." I stand perfectly still, letting his tirade wash over me. The morning sun streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the diamond on Vivian's finger as she leisurely stirs her mimosa. "You actually thought you could walk out of my house, embarrass my family in front of the entire hospital board, and dictate terms to me regarding my own daughter Marcus," continues, his volume rising. "You forgot who you are. You forgot where you came from. I am taking full custody of Zuri. The petition cites your erratic behavior, your emotional instability, and your complete lack of independent income. No judge in Atlanta will grant custody to an unemployed homeless woman over a respected medical CEO." Vivian sets her crystal glass down on the table. She cannot resist joining the execution. She thrives on the sheer spectacle of financial ruin. She pulls her smartphone from the pocket of her silk robe and unlocks the screen with a deliberate, theatrical slowness. She holds the device up so I can see the banking application glowing brightly. "Just to be absolutely certain you understand your new reality," Vivian says, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She taps her manicured fingernail against the screen. I watch the digital prompt confirm the action. "You are officially locked out, Chloe," Vivian announces, a triumphant, wicked smile stretching across her face. I just froze the final joint checking account. The emergency funds, the household allowance, the grocery debit cards, every single line of credit attached to the DuPont name is now terminated. You do not have the resources to buy a cup of coffee, let alone hire a defense attorney to fight Marcus in family court. You are entirely erased from our financial ecosystem. Jasmine lets out a soft, mocking sigh from her seat across the table. "It really is a tragedy," Jasmine remarks, examining her cuticles. "But you should have known better than to bite the hand that feeds you." At least you got a few good years of pretending you belonged in our tax bracket. Brad chuckles, taking a long sip of his black coffee. He is already bored with the domestic drama, his mind likely drifting back to the $50 million Medicare fraud ring he was just bragging about. He has no idea that the phantom inventory scheme he proudly detailed 5 minutes ago was the final nail in his own coffin. I look at the four of them. I look at Marcus puffing his chest with unearned pride. I look at Vivian clutching her phone like a weapon of mass destruction. I look at Brad and Jasmine comfortably resting on a mountain of stolen federal funds. They are utterly convinced of their absolute invincibility. They believe their wealth makes them untouchable. They believe the law bends to their will. They are threatening to take away a life I never actually wanted. They are threatening to strip me of assets that do not belong to them. They think I am mourning the loss of a mansion that will be seized by federal marshals in less than 24 hours. They think I am terrified of losing access to medical clinics that are currently being targeted for a massive coordinated tactical raid by the United States government. The sheer spectacular irony of their arrogance threatens to break my composure, but I hold it back. I let the silence stretch across the morning room. I let them bask in their perceived victory. Then I take a step forward. Marcus stops pacing. He watches me approach the mahogany table, his eyes narrowing slightly. He expects me to reach for the documents and tear them up. He expects me to fall to my knees and beg him to reconsider. He expects me to plead for my daughter. Instead, sign them! Marcus demands, his voice echoing off the high-vaulted ceilings of the morning room. He presses a finger hard against the thick stack of legal documents, his chest puffed out with the arrogant certainty of a man who believes he is a king. This mansion is owned by my mother's LLC. The clinics are protected by layers of corporate shielding you cannot even begin to comprehend. You walk away with the clothes on your back. You take absolutely nothing from this family. Vivian steps forward, the silk of her imported robe rustling softly against the marble floor. She pulls her smartphone from her pocket, holding it up like an executioner's blade. With a theatrical, deliberate slowness, she dramatically hits a sequence of buttons to freeze our joint checking account. You are officially locked out, Chloe. She sneers, her tone dripping with venomous satisfaction. I just terminated the emergency funds, the household allowance, and every single line of credit. You do not have the resources to buy a cup of coffee. I look down at the heavy blue-bound divorce petition resting on the mahogany table. I reach out and pick up the silver Montblanc pen. I do not read the dense legal jargon. I do not check the custody stipulations or review the brutal asset division clauses they spent all night drafting. I simply sign the divorce papers, without looking, my hand moving in swift, unbroken, decisive strokes across every dotted line. I drop the pen. It hits the table with a sharp, final clatter. I push the stack of documents back across the polished wood until they rest against Marcus's hand. Then I smile. It is a chilling, predatory smile. It is the smile of a hunter who has spent 3 grueling years standing silently in the freezing rain waiting for the prey to finally step into the snare. It is a smile that makes the air in the bright sunlit room suddenly drop 10 degrees. Marcus stares at my signature, his arrogant posture faltering for a fraction of a second. His brow furrows in deep confusion. He opens his mouth to speak, to hurl another classist insult, to demand to know why I am not weeping or begging for my survival. But before he can form a single word, the sharp, frantic ringing of his cell phone shatters the quiet of the morning room. He glances at the caller ID, rolling his eyes in profound irritation. It is David, his chief financial officer. Marcus answers with a bark of annoyance, furious that his moment of absolute victory is being interrupted. I watch with absolute hyper-focused precision as the color rapidly drains from his face. His skin turns a sickly, translucent white, resembling a ghost. His jaw goes completely slack. What do you mean they are in the lobby? Marcus whispers into the receiver, his voice trembling with a sudden, unfiltered terror that strips away every ounce of his polished bravado. What do you mean federal agents are seizing the servers? Who authorized a raid on my clinics? Vivian scoffs loudly, completely oblivious to the gravity of her son's panic. She taps the screen of her phone, intending to flaunt my frozen accounts one last time and savor my supposed destruction. Suddenly, a relentless cascade of urgent chimes erupts from her device. Ding, ding, ding. She stares at the glowing screen, her perfectly sculpted features contorting in pure shock. My cards! Vivian gasps, her fingers frantically tapping the glass in a desperate, futile rhythm. She tries to refresh the banking application, her breath hitching in her throat. The black cards, the offshore holding accounts, the Vanguard trusts, they are all returning critical error codes. They are all declining. Every single cent is locked. Before Vivian can even finish her panicked, breathless sentence, Brad's phone begins to vibrate violently against the breakfast table. He snatches it up, pressing it to his ear. He listens for a total of 3 seconds. His hand goes completely limp. The phone slips from his grasp, crashing onto the marble floor and cracking the screen. The Cayman accounts are frozen! Brad stammers, his eyes wide and vacant, staring at the shattered glass at his feet. The bank just issued a total corporate lockdown. They said a federal hold was placed on the entire subsidiary by the Department of Justice. The ghost inventory funds are completely inaccessible. Jasmine lets out a sharp, confused gasp, clutching the edge of the table. Brad, what are you talking about? She asks, her voice pitching upward in sheer panic. What federal hold? What is happening to our money? They are all staring at their phones, their screens, their crumbling financial fortress. They cannot comprehend how their invincible $50 million empire is evaporating in real time. They do not know that while Brad was casually bragging about ghost inventory through the Cayman subsidiary, my hand was resting quietly in my pocket. They do not know that I tapped a silent, encrypted distress sequence on my federal communication device, transmitting their exact cipher phrase directly to Agent Sterling. The tactical raid scheduled for Friday dawn was instantly accelerated to this exact moment. Marcus drops his phone onto the table. His hands are visibly shaking. He looks at Vivian, who is frantically dialing her private banker to no avail. He looks at Brad, who looks like he is about to be physically sick. And finally, his terrified, wide-eyed gaze locks onto me. The pieces are slowly, painfully falling into place in his mind. The unbothered, immediate signature on the divorce papers. The complete lack of panic regarding the frozen joint accounts. The chilling, unshakable smile. The illusion of the submissive, uneducated trophy wife shatters completely into a million jagged pieces. I do not cower. I do not look away. I stand up straight, pulling my shoulders back, shedding the meek persona I have worn for 3 agonizing years. I let the full weight of my actual identity, my true authority, radiate through the room. I am no longer the charity case they brought into their pristine, wealthy world to mock and control. I am a senior forensic accountant for the federal government, and I am the architect of their total destruction. I look directly at Vivian, who spent years mocking my public university degree. I look at Brad and Jasmine, who built their luxury lifestyle on the backs of exploited patients. And finally, I look at Marcus, the man who thought he could discard me like trash. Did you really think a ghetto girl wouldn't read the fine print? Marcus is completely paralyzed. The phone in his hand is a useless brick of plastic and glass. He stares at me, his mouth opening and closing as he tries to form a coherent sentence. The sheer magnitude of the systemic collapse happening around him has completely short-circuited his brain. Vivian is frantically tapping her declined black cards against the mahogany table as if physical force will reconnect her to her vanished wealth. Brad is hyperventilating, his eyes darting frantically around the room, searching for an exit that does not exist. I step away from the signed divorce papers and walk slowly around the long breakfast table. I let my hand trail lightly over the expensive silk upholstery of the dining chairs. The silence in the room is absolute, broken only by the ragged, shallow breathing of the people who thought they owned me. You really should have paid closer attention to those Cayman accounts, Brad. I say, my voice steady and conversational. The ghost inventory structure was clever, I will admit. It took me almost 4 months to fully map the corporate shell games you set up in the Caribbean. But you made one critical fatal error. You tied the offshore routing numbers directly to the domestic operating accounts of the DuPont clinics. When the Department of Justice froze the primary assets this morning, the offshore accounts were automatically triggered for seizure. Every single dollar you stole from the federal government is currently sitting in a secure holding account managed by the FBI. Brad drops his head into his hands, letting out a pathetic, muffled sob. Jasmine stares at him in absolute horror, realizing that her life of endless shopping sprees and society galas is completely over. "This is impossible," Marcus finally chokes out. His voice is weak, stripped of all its usual booming authority. "You do not have the clearance. You are a stay-at-home mother. You do not know anything about corporate finance." I stop walking and turn to face him directly. I tilt my head, allowing myself a moment of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. "I have a master's degree in forensic accounting from the very public university your mother loves to mock," I reply, my tone sharp and uncompromising. "And for the past 3 years, I have been working as an undercover operative for the federal government. My entire marriage to you, Marcus, was a targeted sting operation. You were the easiest mark the agency ever identified. Your ego was so massive, so blindingly fragile, that you never once questioned why a woman like me would tolerate a man like you. You needed a submissive audience, and I needed unrestricted access to your private servers." Marcus stumbles backward, his legs hitting the edge of his chair. He collapses into the seat, his arrogant posture completely obliterated. He looks like a hollow, terrified shell of a man. Vivian finally stops tapping her credit cards. She rises slowly from the head of the table, her silk robe suddenly looking absurdly out of place. Her face is twisted into a mask of pure aristocratic rage. She refuses to accept defeat. She refuses to believe that the woman she tormented for years has systematically dismantled her empire. "You are lying!" Vivian snarls, pointing a manicured finger at me. "You are trying to scare us with some ridiculous delusion. We have lawyers. We have judges on retainer. We have political connections across the entire state. You cannot touch the DuPont family. Our core assets are completely insulated. This house, the trust funds, the generational wealth, it is all locked inside private LLCs. We will crush you in court, Chloe. We will absolutely destroy you." I reach into the inner pocket of my dark sweater. I pull out a single folded sheet of heavy watermark paper. I hold it loosely in my hand, feeling the satisfying weight of their absolute ruin. "I was wondering when you would bring up the private LLCs, Vivian," I say, stepping closer to her end of the table. "Let us talk about those core assets. Specifically, let us talk about the financial crisis your clinics faced 3 years ago. You did an excellent job keeping it out of the society papers, but the clinics were bleeding cash. You were 2 weeks away from missing payroll and defaulting on your primary mortgages." Vivian's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of genuine fear piercing through her rage. "You needed a massive injection of liquid capital." I continue pacing deliberately in front of her. "But the traditional banks refused to touch you because your debt-to-income ratio was catastrophic. So you went looking for private equity. You found an offshore investment firm willing to wire you $10 million within 24 hours. It was a lifeline. You took the money, signed the paperwork, and saved your precious empire. But the terms of that loan were brutally predatory, Vivian. The interest rates were astronomical, and the collateral requirement was absolute." I unfold the heavy paper in my hands. The crisp rustle of the document echoes loudly in the tense, breathless room. 3 years ago, when your clinics almost went bankrupt, Vivian took a predatory loan from Vanguard Holdings. I meet her terrified gaze, watching her process the name of the shell company I personally created. You never questioned where the money came from because you were desperate. You just saw the wire transfer and assumed you had outsmarted the system. You never met the CEO of Vanguard Holdings, did you? Vivian stares at me, her chest heaving, the color draining entirely from her lips. "Because you are looking at her," I state flatly. I step forward and drop the foreclosure notice on the breakfast table, letting it land directly on top of her imported linen placemat. It is a fully executed, judicially approved notice of default and foreclosure. "When the federal government froze your accounts this morning, you officially defaulted on the Vanguard loan. I explain, watching her eyes scan the bold black lettering on the page. The collateral clause was immediately triggered. Vanguard Holdings just executed an aggressive total asset seizure. Vivian's mouth falls open. She looks from the paper to me, her aristocratic facade completely shattered. The reality of her absolute, unmitigated destruction finally sets in. You don't own this mansion, Vivian, I do, and you have 48 hours to vacate my property. Vivian stares at the foreclosure notice resting on her imported linen placemat. Her perfectly manicured fingers hover over the document, refusing to actually touch the paper, as if it might physically burn her. For a long, agonizing moment, the morning room remains absolutely silent. Then a sharp, brittle laugh bursts from Vivian's throat. It is a terrible sound, completely devoid of humor, vibrating with aggressive, desperate denial. She looks at Marcus, then looks back at me, her face twisting into a mask of pure condescension. You actually went through the trouble of forging a bank notice, Vivian says, her voice loud and incredibly forceful. She stands taller, drawing on decades of unchecked privilege to rebuild her shattered reality. You printed a fake document to try and scare me out of my own home. This is pathetic, Chloe. This is beyond pathetic. You are having a complete psychological breakdown. Marcus instantly latches onto his mother's delusion. The color rushes back into his face as his narcissistic brain aggressively rejects the concept of his own defeat. He points a shaking finger at me, his chest heaving. That is exactly what this is, Marcus declares, his voice booming through the room. You have lost your mind. The reality of the divorce has completely broken you. You probably overheard Brad talking about the Cayman subsidiary at dinner last month and fabricated this entire insane fantasy. The Department of Justice does not freeze accounts based on the word of a bitter, unemployed housewife. This is a routine banking glitch. The servers are simply undergoing a scheduled compliance audit. Brad opens his mouth, his eyes darting frantically toward his broken phone on the floor. He knows the difference between a routine audit and a targeted federal asset freeze, but Vivian silences him with a single venomous glare. She will not allow reality to penetrate her fortress. We are not entertaining this psychotic delusion for another second, Vivian commands, sweeping her gaze across her family. We have an empire to run, and we have the annual Atlanta Medical Charity Gala tonight. We are the guests of honor. We will not allow the deranged ramblings of an unhinged woman to disrupt our schedule. Jasmine nervously smooths her hair, eagerly clinging to Vivian's manufactured confidence. But what about the frozen accounts, Jasmine asks quietly. How are we supposed to cover the gala expenses if the cards are declining? It is a temporary security hold, Vivian snaps, refusing to concede an inch. I will call the bank president directly and have it resolved by noon. In the meantime, tonight's gala is more critical than ever. The entire hospital board will be there, along with the most prominent private equity investors in the state. If there is a temporary liquidity issue with the clinics, we will secure emergency bridge loans from our social circle tonight. We will walk into that ballroom, we will project absolute financial dominance, and we will remind the city of Atlanta exactly who the DuPont family is. Marcus nods vigorously, his arrogant swagger fully returning. He picks up his dead cell phone, pocketing it as if nothing is wrong. He looks at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated malice. And as for you, Marcus sneers, stepping toward me, you just handed me the perfect ammunition for the custody hearing. When I speak to the board members tonight, I will tell them exactly what happened here this morning. I will tell the entire Buckhead social elite that my ex-wife suffered a violent delusional break from reality. I will tell them you forged legal documents, claimed to be a federal agent, and threatened my family. By tomorrow morning, you will not just be homeless. You will be institutionalized. No judge will ever let you near Zuri again. They truly believe this. They honestly think they can just put on their designer tuxedos, pour expensive champagne, and simply network their way out of a massive federal indictment. Their absolute reliance on their social status is blinding them to the $50 million trap closing around their throats. They think their wealth makes them immune to the law. I do not argue with them. I do not try to convince them that the tactical teams are already mobilizing. I simply look at the four of them, memorizing the exact expressions of arrogance on their faces. I want to remember this specific moment of pure, unearned confidence. I will leave you to your breakfast, I say, my voice perfectly calm and devoid of any emotion. I turn my back on them and walk out of the morning room. I do not rush. I walk at a measured, deliberate pace through the grand foyer, leaving the signed divorce papers and the foreclosure notice resting on their mahogany table. I pull the heavy oak door open and step out into the cool morning air. I walk down the manicured driveway and slide into the back of the waiting unmarked vehicle. Take me to the mobile command center, I instruct the driver. As the car pulls away from the sprawling estate, my secure federal device vibrates softly in my pocket. I pull it out and look at the encrypted screen. It is an automated email notification forwarded from my old unmonitored personal account. It is an electronic invitation to the Atlanta Medical Charity Gala. Vivian controls the Charity Foundation's master registry. She must have intentionally left my name on the digital mailing list, assuming I would receive the glamorous invitation while sitting penniless in a cheap motel. It is a calculated petty taunt. She wants me to see the glittering event I am no longer allowed to attend. She wants to remind me that she controls the gates to the elite world she just violently expelled me from. I stare at the digital invitation glowing on my screen. I read the strict black-tie dress code and the schedule of events. The keynote address is scheduled for exactly 9 o'clock tonight, delivered by Marcus DuPont himself. It is the exact moment he plans to stand at a podium and publicly assassinate my character to a room full of billionaires. I open a secure messaging channel to Agent Sterling. Delay the clinic raids until 2100 hours. I type rapidly. I want the tactical execution to synchronize perfectly with Marcus's keynote address. Have the arrest warrants delivered directly to the Grand Ballroom at the St. Regis Hotel. Sterling replies almost instantly. The tactical teams are locked and loaded. Are you attending the gala, Chloe? I look back at the iron gates of the DuPont mansion, fading into the distance. I think about Vivian's sheer, terrifying arrogance. I think about Marcus confidently promising to have me institutionalized. They believe a woman from my background is too intimidated by their wealth to ever fight back. They believe they hold all the power. I tap the screen, selecting the automated response box on the digital gala invitation. Did you really think a ghetto girl wouldn't read the fine print? I say aloud to the empty car. I press accept. The St. Regis Grand Ballroom smells of imported white orchids, heavy designer perfume, and the distinct metallic tang of desperate money. Beneath towering multi-tiered crystal chandeliers, the annual Atlanta Medical Charity Gala is in full swing. Waiters in pristine white jackets weave through a sea of bespoke tuxedos and glittering evening gowns carrying silver trays loaded with champagne, flutes, and caviar. It is the absolute pinnacle of elite society, a room where millions of dollars change hands over polite laughter and perfectly orchestrated handshakes. Standing near a massive, intricately carved ice sculpture, Marcus is holding court. I watch him from the shadowed alcove of the upper mezzanine, completely unseen. Marcus is leaning in close to Arthur Sterling, the most prominent private equity investor in the state of Georgia. Marcus has his hand resting on Arthur's shoulder, projecting the image of a confident, unshakable CEO. He is pitching for his life. He knows the Cayman accounts are locked. He knows Vivian's black cards are declining. He knows he needs a massive infusion of untraceable cash before the banks open on Monday morning to cover the catastrophic Vanguard default. It is a deeply personal tragedy, Arthur Marcus says, shaking his head with rehearsed heavy sorrow. His voice carries up to the mezzanine, smooth and dripping with fabricated grief. Chloe suffered a catastrophic mental collapse this morning. The pressure of our lifestyle, the demands of the public eye, she simply lost her grip on reality. We are finalizing her placement in a private, highly secure psychiatric facility in Switzerland as we speak. Vivian stands right beside him, playing the role of the heartbroken matriarch to absolute perfection. She touches the heavy diamond necklace resting against her collarbone, a necklace purchased with stolen Medicare funds. It breaks my heart, Vivian murmurs, her tone laced with a perfectly calculated sympathetic sigh. She was completely delusional, Arthur. She was screaming about federal agents and trying to steal our home. We had to freeze her accounts just to stop her from harming herself or fleeing the state. But we must remain strong and focus on the future. The DuPont clinics are primed for a massive statewide expansion, and we are prepared to offer you an exclusive emergency buy-in tonight. They are utilizing my supposed insanity as a marketing tool. They are spinning a fiction of my breakdown to secure a bridge loan from a billionaire. I check my watch. It is exactly 8:45 in the evening. In 15 minutes, 24 heavily armed federal agents will breach the loading docks and the main lobby doors. I step out of the shadows and walk toward the heavy brass-handled double doors at the top of the grand marble staircase. The two uniformed ushers standing guard take one look at me and immediately step back, their practiced polite greetings dying completely in their throats. I step into the blinding golden light of the grand ballroom. I am not wearing the pastel conservative floor-length evening gowns Vivian always selected for me to ensure I blended harmlessly into the background. I am wearing a midnight black, razor-sharp tailored designer suit. The cut is severe, uncompromising, and absolutely commanding. I wear no diamonds, no pearls, and no soft accessories. I am carrying a single sleek leather clutch holding my federal identification badge. I pause at the very top of the landing looking down at the glittering sea of the Atlanta elite. The transformation of the ballroom is instantaneous and violent. The soft, ambient hum of classical music falters abruptly as the lead violinist looks up and loses his place on the strings. The rhythmic clinking of crystal glasses ceases entirely. A wave of dead, suffocating silence ripples outward from the grand staircase, swallowing the massive room whole. Hundreds of heads turn in unison. The elite crowd stares up at me, their faces registering a mixture of profound shock and morbid fascination. Marcus freezes. His champagne flute stops halfway to his mouth. Across the cavernous room, I watch the color drain entirely from his face, leaving his skin a sickly ashen gray. His jaw unhinges. He just spent the last 20 minutes telling the most powerful men in the city that I was locked away in a padded room, completely detached from reality. Yet here I stand, radiating an absolute chilling authority that shatters his carefully constructed narrative into a million jagged pieces. Vivian grips Marcus's arm so hard her knuckles turn stark white. Her fake, grieving smile turns to ash. She realizes with sudden and terrifying clarity that the foreclosure notice I dropped on her breakfast table was not a delusion. I begin my descent. I do not look down at the marble steps. I keep my eyes locked dead onto Marcus's terrified face. The crowd of socialites, politicians, and medical executives physically parts before me like the Red Sea. They step backward, pulling their expensive silk skirts and tuxedo jackets out of my way, sensing the highly dangerous shift in the atmosphere. The whispers ignite instantly, spreading like dry brush catching fire. "Isn't that Marcus's wife?" a woman whispers loudly to my left. "I thought Vivian said she was institutionalized. She looks like she owns the building." I am an apex predator walking calmly into a cage of cornered animals. Near the bottom of the staircase, the illusion of their high society control begins to violently crack. Brad and Jasmine are standing near the champagne fountain. Brad is sweating profusely through his designer collar, his eyes darting frantically toward the ballroom exits. His mind is clearly paralyzed by the reality of the frozen offshore accounts. But Jasmine does not know about the impending tactical raid. She only knows that her fragile social standing, her country club memberships, and her leased luxury cars are evaporating right before her eyes. Jasmine spots me descending the stairs. Pure panic and vicious, desperate self-preservation flash across her face. She knows that if I reach the ballroom floor and speak directly to Arthur Sterling, the DuPont empire is finished forever. Jasmine turns abruptly to a passing waiter. Her hand darts out, snatching a full, oversized crystal glass of deep red Cabernet from his silver tray. She grabs Brad by the arm, violently dragging her terrified husband toward the bottom of the marble steps to block my path. I can read her lips perfectly as she hisses at Brad. "I will handle this. One clumsy spill, her suit is ruined, and security will drag the crazy woman out for causing a public scene." I reach the third to last step. Brad stands there trembling, completely useless and pale. Jasmine steps directly into the center of my path, physically blocking my descent to the ballroom floor. Her knuckles are white as she grips the long stem of the wine glass. The dark red liquid sloshes dangerously close to the rim, perfectly aligned to ruin the crisp white silk blouse I wear beneath my dark jacket. Her eyes lock onto mine, burning with desperate, venomous intent, as she shifts her weight, preparing to lunge forward and execute her final pathetic attack. Jasmine lunges forward, her arms swinging in a wide, desperate arc, the heavy crystal goblet tip sending a dark, ruby wave of Cabernet Sauvignon flying directly toward the pristine white silk blouse beneath my tailored jacket. It is a classic, pathetic country club maneuver. It is a transparent attempt to force me out of the room under the guise of an embarrassing, clumsy accident. I can see her ankle rolling slightly on purpose to fake a stumble. Her mouth is already forming the shape of a loud, theatrical apology, ready to feign horror at her own clumsiness, while simultaneously demanding that security escort the ruined, unstable woman out the service exit. I do not flinch. I do not raise my hands to protect my face or cry out in surprise. Having spent 3 years studying every micro-expression and psychological vulnerability of this family, their tactics are agonizingly predictable. I simply execute a perfectly timed millimeter-precise pivot to my left. I step off the final marble stair, my heels clicking softly against the floor, and glide entirely out of the trajectory of her attack. Jasmine's forward momentum is entirely dependent on hitting my body to stop her fall. When she meets nothing but empty air, her center of gravity violently betrays her. Her 5-inch Louboutin stiletto catches hard on the thick brass trimming of the bottom step. Her arms pinwheel in genuine sudden panic. The heavy wine glass slips from her trembling fingers. Caught in the sudden draft of her uncontrolled forward pitch, the entire contents of the goblet splash backward. The wine rains directly down the front of her own dress. The deep red liquid hits the immaculate $15,000 custom white silk gown like a gruesome explosion. The stain blooms instantly, ruining the delicate hand-stitched beadwork and turning the elegant bodice into a dripping, ruined disaster. But gravity is not finished exacting its toll. Jasmine pitches forward, completely out of control, and crashes headfirst into a waiter rushing past the base of the staircase. The poor man, carrying a massive silver tray loaded with towering crystal champagne flutes, takes the full brunt of her flailing weight. The collision is catastrophic. The heavy silver tray flies upward. 3 dozen champagne glasses launch into the air, catching the light of the massive chandeliers for one sparkling suspended second before raining down upon them. They shatter against the polished marble floor with a deafening percussive crash that echoes violently throughout the cavernous ballroom. Jasmine hits the floor hard. She slides through a dangerous, sticky mixture of expensive champagne, dark red wine, and hundreds of shards of broken crystal. She lands on her hands and knees, her ruined dress soaking up the puddles, gasping for air, before letting out a shrill, hysterical shriek of absolute horror. A collective gasp erupts from the hundreds of elite guests. Women in bespoke designer gowns leap backward to protect their expensive hemlines from the flying glass. Men in tailored tuxedos step away in shock, their conversations dying instantly. The string quartet stops playing entirely, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence in the room, broken only by Jasmine's frantic, echoing sobs. I look down at her from my perfectly composed stance. My midnight black suit is immaculate. Not a single drop of liquid has touched my clothing. Brad is still frozen on the third step. His mouth hangs open, utterly paralyzed by the spectacle. He does not reach down to help his wife. He does not call for assistance. His mind is completely broken, torn between the public destruction of his wife's dignity and the terrifying private reality of his frozen Cayman bank accounts. He stands there looking like a hollow mannequin, entirely useless. Across the room, the illusion of the high society DuPont elegance officially dies. Vivian looks like she's about to physically combust. Her hands fly to her face, her eyes wide with unadulterated panic. The impenetrable facade of high society dominance she has spent decades meticulously cultivating has just devolved into a cheap, embarrassing circus spectacle. She looks around the room, seeing the expressions of distaste and pity on the faces of the hospital board members she was trying to impress. Arthur Sterling, the billionaire private equity investor Marcus was desperately attempting to secure a bridge loan from, takes a very deliberate physical step away from Marcus. Sterling's face hardens with severe professional disgust at the chaotic, unprofessional display unfolding on the floor. He shakes his head slightly, communicating without words that the deal is completely dead. No investor drops millions into a family that cannot even walk down a flight of stairs without creating a public hazard. Marcus watches his financial lifeline evaporate before his eyes. He looks from Sterling to his mother, who is trembling with humiliation, and then to his brother's wife, who is weeping in a puddle of spilled wine. Finally, his eyes lock onto me. I am standing calm, untouched, and holding the absolute authority of the room. The veins in Marcus's neck bulge against his tight, formal collar. The sheer, overwhelming humiliation snaps the very last remaining thread of his fragile sanity. His entire narrative of my mental breakdown has been proven false just by my calm presence, and his own family has provided the unhinged behavior he tried to pin on me. He abandons Arthur Sterling without a word of apology. He pushes roughly past a group of startled medical executives, his face contorting into a terrifying mask of desperate, explosive fury. He storms toward the main stage at the far end of the grand ballroom, his heavy footsteps thudding against the wooden risers. He ignores the frantic, whispered protests of the event coordinator trying to block his path. Marcus steps up to the clear acrylic podium, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with a dangerous, cornered rage. He reaches out and violently rips the microphone from its heavy brass stand. A sharp, piercing screech of audio feedback tears through the massive ballroom, forcing several guests to cover their ears and instantly silencing the remaining whispers in the crowd. The piercing screech of audio feedback from the violently mishandled microphone echoes off the gold leaf ceilings, forcing the billionaires and socialites to physically flinch and cover their ears. Marcus stands at the podium, gripping the edges of the clear acrylic stand so tightly his knuckles rival the color of his stark, white, tailored shirt. He takes a long, shuddering breath, forcibly manipulating his enraged features into a mask of profound, manufactured sorrow. It is a terrifyingly flawless transition. He is the consummate corporate sociopath, instantly shifting from a cornered, panicked animal to a grieving, benevolent leader in the blink of an eye. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus's voice booms through the massive ballroom speakers, smooth and heavily laced, with a perfectly calibrated tremor of heartbreak. I must offer my deepest, most sincere apologies to every single one of you. You were invited here tonight to celebrate the future of medical innovation, not to witness a private family tragedy unfold before your eyes. He pauses, bowing his head for a fraction of a second. The ballroom remains dead silent, utterly captivated by his performance. He gestures vaguely toward me, standing amidst the shattered champagne flutes and the sobbing, wine-soaked mess of his sister-in-law on the floor. Please excuse my estranged wife. Marcus continues, his voice echoing with heavy practiced pity. She is severely unwell. What you are witnessing is the tragic culmination of a complete psychotic break. The dissolution of our marriage, combined with severe underlying mental health issues, has completely detached her from reality. We have spent the last 48 hours desperately trying to get her the psychiatric help she so clearly needs, but she evaded her medical transport this morning. I watch Vivian nodding in solemn agreement from the floor. She places a comforting hand on the arm of the city's mayor, whispering corroborating lies into his ear. She is validating Marcus's narrative in real time, painting me as a dangerous, hysterical woman who needs to be locked away for her own safety. She believes she is an undercover operative, Marcus says to the crowd, offering a sad, patronizing smile. She has been fabricating documents, spinning wild conspiracy theories about our clinics and threatening our family. We love Chloe, but she is a danger to herself. I ask for your grace and your discretion as we handle this heartbreaking medical emergency. Marcus scans the perimeter of the ballroom, his eyes sweeping past the horrified guests until he spots two massive men standing near the rear service exits. They are broad-shouldered, wearing identical dark suits with discreet earpieces curled around their lobes. To an arrogant CEO, accustomed to giving orders, they look exactly like high-end private hotel security. Marcus points directly at them from the stage, issuing a sharp, authoritative command. "Security, please step forward." Marcus orders, his voice ringing with absolute executive command. "Escort my wife out of the ballroom and hand her over to the medical professionals waiting outside. Do whatever is necessary to restrain her, but please be gentle. She does not know what she is doing." The two men step away from the wall simultaneously. They move with frightening, synchronized precision. They do not hurry, but their strides are long and purposeful, cutting through the sea of designer gowns and tuxedos. The elite crowd parts for them immediately, anticipating a violent, embarrassing struggle. Vivian crosses her arms, a vicious, triumphant smirk finally breaking through her mask of fake grief. She looks at me with pure, unadulterated venom. She expects to see me dragged out by my arms, screaming and kicking, perfectly fulfilling the narrative of the hysterical, broken woman they just sold to a room full of billionaires. Brad is still sweating profusely, leaning against a pillar for physical support, but even he lets out a long, ragged sigh of relief. Jasmine is still on the floor, clutching her ruined $15,000 custom silk gown, weeping into the spilled wine, but she manages to look up, eager to witness my final humiliation. I do not move a single muscle. I keep my hands resting calmly at my sides. I maintain direct, unflinching eye contact with Marcus, up on the stage. The heavy footsteps of the two large men stop directly in front of me. The entire ballroom holds its collective breath, waiting for the physical altercation to begin. They wait for the security guards to grab my wrists and force me toward the service elevators. Instead, the man on the right smoothly pivots on his heel. The man on the left mirrors the exact same motion. They do not reach for me. They do not speak a word. They simultaneously take one step backward and stand at strict parade rest, flanking me perfectly. They stand positioned like a hardened, impenetrable protective detail, their eyes scanning the room, effectively guarding my back from the entire DuPont family. They are not St. Regis Hotel security. They are federal agents from Sterling's tactical division, embedded in the crowd for the last 3 hours, waiting for my exact signal. The visual impact of the moment is staggering. The narrative Marcus just spun instantly evaporates into the cold, air-conditioned breeze of the ballroom. A delusional, hysterical woman does not command a synchronized elite security detail. A psychotic housewife does not stand in the center of a shattered ballroom, radiating absolute lethal authority. Up on the stage, the microphone slips a fraction of an inch in Marcus's sweaty grip. The blood drains so rapidly from his face that his skin takes on the color of wet chalk. His mouth opens, but his vocal cords completely paralyze. The brilliant, charismatic CEO is suddenly gone, replaced by a terrified man staring down the barrel of his own destruction. Vivian's triumphant smirk falls entirely off her face. Her jaw drops open. She looks at the federal agent standing at my shoulders, and the true, horrifying reality of the frozen Cayman accounts finally pierces through her fortress of arrogance. She takes a stumbling step backward, bumping hard into the carved ice sculpture behind her. I step forward. My designer heels crush the broken crystal champagne flutes scattered across the floor, grinding the glass into a fine white powder. I do not spare a single glance for Jasmine crying in the puddles of spilled wine, nor do I look at Vivian's terrified, pale face. I walk with measured, deliberate, predatory steps, leaving the protective detail behind me. I approach the bottom of the grand stage. I place my hand on the polished mahogany railing of the stage steps. Marcus backs away from the podium, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with the realization that he cannot talk network or buy his way out of this room. I ascend the stairs. I do not run. I take the final 3 steps with the steady, measured pace of an executioner. Marcus turns toward me, his eyes wide and frantic, the microphone gripped in his trembling fist, like a weapon he has no idea how to use. He opens his mouth, perhaps to shout for security again, perhaps to hurl another desperate insult, but the sound dies completely in his throat. The 2 federal agents step up to the base of the stage, effectively barricading the stairs. No one is coming to his rescue. I do not rush. I take the steps one by one, the sharp click of my heels against the polished wood, echoing through the dead, suffocating silence of the grand ballroom. Marcus continues to backpedal his expensive leather shoes, scraping frantically against the floorboards. He hits the heavy velvet curtain draped behind the speaker system and flinches, physically trapped. His chest heaves beneath his tailored tuxedo shirt, his eyes wide and panicked as he realizes his absolute authority has evaporated. I step directly up to the clear acrylic podium. Marcus is still gripping the microphone stand, his knuckles white, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. He looks like a cornered animal, realizing the steel jaws of a trap have finally snapped shut. I do not ask for permission. I reach out and rip the microphone directly from his trembling hand. A sharp, high-pitched squeal of audio feedback pierces the air, making half the ballroom wince and cover their ears, but I do not break eye contact with my soon-to-be ex-husband. I look down at the master control deck embedded in the podium. The touchscreen currently displays the golden glittering logo of the Atlanta Medical Charity Gala. I open my sleek leather clutch, retrieve a silver encrypted flash drive, and slide it smoothly into the primary port. My fingers fly across the console, easily bypassing their basic security protocols and overriding their pre-programmed presentation loop. The 30-foot projector screen spanning the back wall of the ballroom goes entirely black. A collective murmur of confusion ripples through the sea of billionaires, socialites, and medical executives. "Let us talk about breakdowns," I announce. My voice booms through the state-of-the-art sound system, echoing off the towering crystal chandeliers. My tone is perfectly level, entirely devoid of the hysteria Marcus promised them. The acoustics of the grand ballroom carry my words into every shadowed corner, forcing absolute chilling clarity upon the crowd. "My husband just stood before you and claimed I suffered a catastrophic detachment from reality." I continue, my eyes scanning the sea of upturned faces. "He claimed the pressure of this lifestyle shattered my mind. He asked for your sympathy, your discretion, and most importantly, your money." I tap the console. The massive screen behind me flashes blindingly white, illuminating the entire room in a harsh, unforgiving glow. Massive, undeniable spreadsheets appear towering over the stage. These are not the sanitized, highly optimistic quarterly reports the board of directors is accustomed to seeing. These are raw, unfiltered banking ledgers. The rows and columns are highlighted in aggressive neon red, detailing a labyrinth of offshore routing numbers, dummy corporations, and shell accounts located primarily in the Cayman Islands. High-resolution images of wire transfer receipts follow, flashing in rapid succession across the 30-foot display. "You are looking at the true foundation of the DuPont medical empire," I state, letting the devastating reality sink into the room. Marcus DuPont did not build his wealth through clinical innovation. He built it through systematic, aggressive fraud. Over the past 4 years, the DuPont clinics have billed the federal government for tens of thousands of phantom procedures, ghost patients, fabricated treatments. The revenue from these non-existent services was routed through offshore subsidiaries to fund the lavish lifestyle you see paraded before you tonight. And 3 weeks ago, Marcus used the clinic's pension funds for unauthorized, highly leveraged trading. They are currently $50 million in the red. The reaction is instantaneous and violently disruptive. The polite veneer of high society vanishes in a heartbeat. The room erupts into a panicked, frantic hum. Arthur Sterling and the other private equity investors stare up at the screen, their faces hardening into masks of pure horror and professional disgust. They are looking at the undeniable, digitized proof of a $50 million federal crime. They realize instantly that the bridge loans Marcus was just pitching were nothing more than a desperate, illegal attempt to cover a catastrophic default before the banks open on Monday morning. I do not let the rising chaos drown me out. I turn my gaze away from Marcus, looking down off the stage to where the rest of the family stands paralyzed in the wreckage of their own making. My eyes lock onto Brad. He is sweating profusely, his expensive silk bow tie crooked, his face the color of wet ash. He looks like he is about to physically collapse under the weight of the glaring projector light. "And the fraud does not end at the executive level," I say, my voice cutting through the panicked murmurs like a surgical blade. I point directly at him. Let us talk about the family supply chain. Brad, your medical supply company, has not shipped a single syringe in 4 years. The elite crowd standing around Brad immediately recoils. They step backward in unison, treating him like he is suddenly contagious, leaving him entirely isolated on the marble floor. He shrinks back, his eyes darting wildly around the room, searching for an escape that does not exist. You bill Medicare for ghost patients? I continue, the heavy amplification of my voice making his sins inescapable. You fabricate invoices for high-end surgical equipment that never existed, and you launder the dirty cash directly back to Marcus through a series of fake consulting fees. You are nothing but a glorified bagman operating under the protection of the DuPont name. Brad is the untouchable white-collar son-in-law. He has spent his entire adult life hiding behind Vivian's stolen money and Marcus's ruthless legal team playing the role of the smug superior country club husband. Being publicly exposed in front of the most powerful people in Atlanta shatters his fragile ego instantly. Pure, unadulterated panic seizes his body. He lets out a high-pitched, strangled sound of absolute terror. He abandons Jasmine, who is still shivering on the floor in her ruined, wine-soaked dress. Brad turns and sprints toward the heavy brass double doors at the back of the ballroom. He shoves blindly past a stunned waiter, knocking a silver tray to the floor, his expensive dress shoes slipping frantically on the polished marble as he scrambles for freedom. He reaches the massive exit doors and throws his entire body weight against the brass handles. They do not budge. He yanks them again, his breath coming in loud, desperate heaves, his fingers slipping on the polished metal. The doors are locked from the outside. The two undercover federal agents stationed near the exit step forward from the shadows, effectively barricading the only way out. Brad hits the solid oak wood with his fists, sobbing openly, completely trapped. The absolute, undeniable destruction of her family's pristine public image is finally too much for Vivian to bear. The high society matriarch completely snaps. The elegant, tightly controlled facade she has worn like armor for decades dissolves into pure feral rage. "Turn that screen off!" Vivian screams, her voice cracking into a shrill, hysterical shriek that slices through the panicked room. She points a violently shaking finger at me, her eyes bulging with pure malice. "You lying, ungrateful wretch!" She pushes past the stunned investors, entirely abandoning any remaining shred of her carefully cultivated social dignity. She stomps toward the stage, her designer heels clicking violently against the floorboards. She reaches the bottom of the stairs and lunges upward, her hands outstretched, her face twisted in a mask of pure hatred, fully intending to slap the truth right out of my mouth. Vivian's hand slices through the air, her heavy, diamond-encrusted rings catching the harsh white glare of the projector screen behind me. She puts her entire body weight into the strike, aiming to physically punish me the way she has emotionally punished me for the last 4 years. She expects me to cower. She expects me to flinch, to take the blow, and apologize just as I was trained to do every time I failed to meet the impossible, suffocating standards of the DuPont dynasty. She expects the obedient, broken wife to accept her discipline in front of her high society peers. I do not flinch. My left hand shoots up, moving with a speed and precision born of absolute clarity. I catch her wrist midair. The impact sends a visible shockwave up her arm. Her forward momentum is stopped dead in its tracks. The sharp, stinging slap she intended never lands. I grip her delicate, aging wrist tightly, my fingers locking around her bones like a vice. Vivian gasps, her eyes widening in profound, unadulterated shock. The high society matriarch, a woman who has never been physically denied or physically challenged in her entire life, stares at my hand as if it is a dangerous alien object. She tries to yank her arm back, utilizing her leverage to break my grip, but I do not let go. I hold her there, suspended in her own impotent rage, forcing her to look directly into my eyes. For 4 years, whenever I dared to question Marcus's late nights at the office, whenever I noticed glaring discrepancies in the clinic's financial reports, or whenever I simply hesitated to wear the painfully tight, uncomfortable dresses she picked out for me, Vivian would lean in close. She would grip my arm, her breath smelling of expensive gin and mints, and hiss the exact same command to silence me. It was her favorite weapon to keep me compliant and small. Now, looking down at her terrified, crumbling face, I deliver her weapon right back to her. Stop embarrassing this family, Vivian, I say. My voice is quiet, pitched only for her, but it carries the absolute chilling authority of a woman who holds all the cards. The words strike her harder and deeper than any physical blow ever could. Her mouth opens and closes silently, mimicking a fish pulled from the water. The realization that she has completely lost control over me, over her son, over her entire fabricated empire, finally shatters her mind. She wrenches her arm free, stumbling backward and clutching her wrist against her chest as if my skin has burned her. She looks wildly around the grand ballroom, desperately searching for a single friendly face, a single ally among the hundreds of guests she has entertained, bribed and manipulated for decades. She looks for the politicians whose campaigns she funded, the hospital board members she dined with, the socialites she commanded. She finds nothing but profound revulsion. The elite socialites she hosted at her lavish garden parties are actively backing away, pulling their silk shawls tightly around their shoulders, as if Vivian is suddenly infectious. The hedge fund managers and medical executives are treating her like a toxic pariah. Arthur Sterling, the billionaire, who was supposed to be their financial savior, is standing near the mahogany bar with his phone pressed hard to his ear. He is loudly, aggressively instructing his legal team to sever all ties with DuPont Medical by morning, entirely ignoring Vivian's pleading gaze. The illusion of the untouchable DuPont legacy dissolves right in front of her eyes, leaving behind nothing but the ugly, undeniable truth of their staggering greed. Then the sound begins. It starts as a distant wail, barely audible over the panicked, chaotic murmurs of the trapped crowd, but it grows louder with terrifying speed. The high, piercing shriek of heavy police sirens cuts through the ambient noise of the city outside. It is not just one siren, but dozens, a massive coordinated convoy converging directly on the St. Regis Hotel. The heavy velvet curtains flanking the ballroom have been drawn back to showcase the magnificent floor-to-ceiling stained glass windows. Suddenly, the darkness outside the glass is violently shattered. Intense rhythmic flashes of red and blue light begin to strobing rapidly against the intricate glass panels. The police lights cast wild, colorful, shifting shadows across the ballroom floor. The aggressive red and blue reflections wash over the terrified faces of the trapped billionaires, over the shattered crystal champagne flutes, grinding into the marble, over the 30-foot projection of Marcus's offshore bank accounts, still glaring brightly from the stage. The panic in the room hits an absolute fever pitch. The realization that the hotel is completely surrounded strikes the elite crowd like a physical wave. Guests who were previously trying to maintain a shred of dignity now abandon all decorum completely. Men in tailored tuxedos shove past women in expensive evening gowns, rushing blindly toward the side exits and the kitchen corridors. They are desperate to escape the blast radius of a federal raid, terrified of being photographed anywhere near the DuPont family. But the exits are entirely blocked. The embedded undercover agents have officially dropped their disguises. Men and women in dark suits are standing shoulder to shoulder at every single doorway, their federal badges now clearly visible, their stances wide and unyielding. They are not arresting the guests, but they are absolutely refusing to let anyone leave the active crime scene. The ballroom has been transformed into a gilded, inescapable cage. The wailing of the sirens outside reaches a deafening crescendo, reverberating forcefully against the thick glass windows. The red and blue lights flash faster and brighter, turning the elegant charity gala into a chaotic, surreal nightmare of law enforcement action. Vivian drops to her knees on the marble floor. She is not fainting, she is simply collapsing under the sheer crushing weight of her impending reality. She covers her ears with her perfectly manicured hands, trying desperately to block out the sound of the approaching sirens, but the noise is absolute and inescapable. It is the sound of her mansions being seized. It is the sound of her offshore accounts being frozen. It is the sound of a federal prison cell slamming shut on her aristocratic life forever. I stand perfectly still at the edge of the stage, the flashing red and blue lights washing over my calm, composed features. I have orchestrated every single second of this night, guiding them perfectly into their own trap. They thought they could discard me like garbage. They thought they could paint me as insane to cover their massive crimes. They vastly underestimated the woman they invited into their home. The heavy, oppressive noise in the ballroom reaches a breaking point. The frantic, terrified shouting of the trapped guests, the wailing of the sirens, the aggressive strobing of the police lights. It all culminates in one singular, breathless second of anticipation. The main doors are kicked open. The heavy oak doors of the St. Regis ballroom splinter backward, crashing against the marble walls with a concussive boom that shakes the floorboards. The illusion of high society evaporates instantly. Dozens of federal agents pour through the entryway like a tidal wave of dark tactical gear and uncompromising authority. They move with terrifying, practiced efficiency. The bright yellow letters of the FBI and the Office of Inspector General stand out starkly against their heavy Kevlar vests. They fan out across the room in perfect synchronization, establishing a hard perimeter and locking down every possible escape route. The panic among the billionaires and socialites becomes absolute chaos. Women in bespoke designer gowns shriek and scatter, abandoning their diamond-encrusted clutch purses on the floor. Men in tailored tuxedos throw their hands in the air, pressing their backs against the silk-lined walls, desperate to distance themselves from the DuPont family. The crystal chandeliers overhead seem to tremble from the sheer force of the raid. Tactical flashlights cut through the dim, romantic lighting of the gala, sweeping across the terrified crowd. Special Agent Sterling strides through the shattered doorway, leading the massive strike force. His face is a mask of hardened resolve. He holds up his gold badge, his voice booming over the screams of the elite guests. Nobody moves. Sterling commands, his voice echoing with absolute finality. This is a federal raid. Keep your hands visible and stay exactly where you are. Sterling locks eyes with the undercover agents flanking me. They give him a sharp nod. The trap is sprung. The target is secured. The tactical units descend on the DuPont family with ruthless precision. Brad is the first to break. He pushes away from the locked exit doors and tries to dart toward the kitchen corridors, sobbing in blind panic. Two massive OIG agents intercept him immediately. They grab him by his expensive lapels, spin him around, and slam him face first against a mirrored pillar. The glass cracks under the impact. Brad wails, instantly begging for a deal, screaming that he only moved the boxes and that Marcus masterminded the entire operation. The sharp metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs snapping shut over his wrists echoes through the room. Jasmine does not even attempt to run. She is still sitting in the puddle of spilled Cabernet Sauvignon, her $15,000 custom silk gown ruined and soaked. An FBI agent hauls her up by her arm. She kicks and thrashes, smearing dark red wine across the agent's tactical pants. She screams for her lawyer, her makeup running down her face in thick black streaks. The agent ignores her hysterics, swiftly spinning her around and securing her wrists behind her back. The click of her handcuffs sounds like a definitive end to her country club reign. Down on the main floor, Vivian is still frozen in shock from my physical defiance. The reality of the tactical raid completely shatters her aristocratic mind. A female federal agent steps up to her, gripping the same wrist I just released. "Get your filthy hands off me!" Vivian shrieks, her voice cracking into a high, feral pitch. "I am Vivian DuPont. I dine with the governor. I fund this city. You cannot touch me. I demand to speak to your superior immediately." The agent does not blink. She does not care about Vivian's political donations or her social standing. The agent violently twists Vivian's arms behind her back, forcing the high society matriarch to bend forward at an awkward, humiliating angle. Vivian gasps in pain and outrage. The agent forces the cold steel cuffs over Vivian's wrists, trapping her diamond bracelets against the metal. The untouchable queen of Atlanta high society is reduced to a common criminal in front of every single peer she spent decades trying to impress. Up on the stage, the situation is even worse. The two undercover agents who tackled Marcus pull him up from the wooden floorboards. His designer tuxedo jacket is torn at the shoulder. His perfect hair is plastered to his sweating forehead. They force him to his knees, right at the edge of the stage, directly in the harsh glare of the projector screen that is still displaying the massive, damning spreadsheets of his offshore accounts. Marcus looks out at his family. He sees his mother in handcuffs. He sees his brother crying against a pillar. He sees his sister-in-law being dragged away. He looks at the investors who were supposed to save him, watching them turn their backs in disgust. His $50 million empire has been reduced to ashes in less than 5 minutes. His eyes finally lock onto me. I am standing perfectly still at the clear acrylic podium looking down at him. The flashing red and blue lights from the police cruisers outside cut through the stained glass windows, washing over his pale, terrified face. The arrogant, untouchable CEO completely dies. The corporate sociopath vanishes, replaced by a broken, desperate man facing the absolute end of his life. Marcus falls forward, straining against the grip of the federal agents holding his arms. "Chloe, please!" Marcus begs, his voice breaking into a ragged, pathetic sob. "Please stop this. You won. You proved your point. Tell them you made a mistake. Tell them the files are fake. I will give you everything. I will sign over the house. I will give you the clean accounts. Just please, I am begging you, make it stop. I am your husband." He is weeping openly now, the tears streaming down his face and dripping onto his torn collar. He is bargaining for his life, offering me the scraps of a fortune he already destroyed. I step out from behind the podium. I walk slowly to the edge of the stage, stopping just inches from where he kneels on the floor. I look down at the man who spent 4 years gaslighting me, manipulating me, and breaking my spirit to cover his own colossal failures. I look at the man who thought he could use my sanity as a shield. I slowly raise my hand. I touch my cheek right on the exact spot where his hand collided with my face earlier tonight, the final violent act of desperation that set this entire avalanche in motion. The skin is still slightly warm, a lingering physical reminder of his cruelty. I drop my hand. My expression is entirely void of sympathy. I look him dead in the eyes, ensuring my voice is steady and absolutely merciless. "That slap did not just hurt Marcus," I say the words, cutting through the chaotic noise of the ballroom like shattered glass. "It cost you 20 years in federal prison." I turn my back on him without another word. The agents haul him to his feet, dragging him toward the exit as his screams of despair are finally swallowed by the wailing sirens. 6 months pass with the ruthless, unstoppable efficiency of a federal prosecution. When you hand the Department of Justice a decrypted, perfectly organized flash drive containing 3 years of offshore wire transfers, fabricated patient ledgers, and offshore shell company routing numbers, the wheels of justice do not grind slowly. They accelerate. The DuPont medical empire does not simply crumble. It is aggressively, systematically dismantled by forensic accountants and federal prosecutors who leave absolutely no stone unturned. The highly publicized trial is not a battle, it is a slaughter. The opulent gold leaf ceilings of the St. Regis Ballroom are permanently replaced by the stark, unforgiving mahogany paneling of the federal courthouse. There are no caterers here. There are no string quartets. There is only the cold, clinical reality of absolute accountability. Brad stands before the federal judge, his entire body trembling violently. The smug, untouchable country club husband is entirely gone. He wears a shapeless, oversized tan jumpsuit, his wrists shackled to a thick leather belt around his waist. He weeps openly at the defense table, his chest heaving as he frantically tries to deflect the blame. He points his shackled hands toward Marcus, sobbing to the judge that he was manipulated, that he only moved the medical boxes, that he never touched the money. The judge stares down at him with profound, icy disgust. The gavel falls with a heavy, concussive crack. Brad is sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit Medicare fraud and money laundering. He collapses into his chair, burying his face in his chained hands, as federal marshals pull him to his feet to begin his sentence. Marcus is brought into the courtroom next. The brilliant, charismatic CEO has been hollowed out. His skin has a sickly gray pallor, and his once immaculate hair is thinning and unkempt. He stands rigidly before the judge, still clinging to a pathetic, shattered fragment of his narcissism. He attempts to raise his chin, opening his mouth to deliver a smooth, practiced corporate speech about healthcare innovation and market disruption. The judge completely silences him before he can utter a single word. The judge reads the staggering financial damage into the official record, outlining the $50 million stolen from taxpayers, the ruined pension funds, and the absolute abuse of medical authority. Marcus flinches with every single syllable. The final sentence is delivered with zero hesitation. 20 years in federal prison. Marcus stares blankly ahead, his eyes dead and vacant. He does not look at me sitting quietly in the gallery. He looks at absolutely nothing. The criminal sentences are only half of the destruction. The financial restitution demanded by the federal government requires the total brutal liquidation of the entire DuPont legacy. Vivian's downfall is a masterpiece of absolute humiliation. The Department of Justice does not simply freeze her accounts. They seize everything. Federal agents march into her sprawling multi-million-dollar estate and box up her designer handbags, her diamond jewelry, and her priceless art collection. The luxury vehicles are towed away on flatbed trucks in broad daylight, while her wealthy neighbors watch from behind their manicured hedges. The high society she worshipped entirely turns its back on her. Her phone calls to senators and board members go straight to disconnected numbers. She is officially banished, erased from the elite social registry, as if she never existed. Today, Vivian DuPont lives in a cramped 300-square-foot apartment on the lowest floor of a decaying building near a roaring interstate highway. The air inside the unit constantly smells of stale cooking oil and damp plaster. There are no maids. There are no caterers. She sits alone on a cheap sagging sofa she bought from a thrift store, wearing a faded gray sweatshirt. She stares blankly at a water stain on the peeling yellow wallpaper, listening to the heavy trucks rattle the thin glass of her single window. Her diamond rings are gone. Her hands are bare. She is completely, irrevocably broken, trapped in the exact kind of poverty she spent her entire life mocking. Jasmine faces her own brand of spectacular ruin. With Brad's assets seized to pay for his criminal defense and federal restitution, she is left with absolutely nothing. The custom silk gowns and $500 salon appointments vanish overnight. She now stands under the harsh buzzing fluorescent lights of a discount grocery store on the outskirts of the city. She wears a scratchy, bright red polyester vest with a plastic name tag pinned crookedly to her chest. Her once immaculate manicured nails are chipped and bitten down to the quick. She scans bruised apples and cheap canned goods, dragging the items across the laser scanner with exhausted, repetitive motions. A customer pushes a crumpled, expired coupon across the conveyor belt. When Jasmine tries to explain that the machine will not accept it, the customer loudly berates her for being slow and incompetent. Jasmine's face flushes with dark, burning humiliation. She cannot scream. She cannot call security. She forces a stiff, humiliating smile, lowers her head, and apologizes to the customer through tightly gritted teeth. She swallows her pride because she desperately needs the hourly wage just to keep her electricity turned on. I sit in the final row of the courtroom signing the last page of my official uncontested divorce papers. I hand the pen back to my attorney with a polite smile. I stand up, smoothing the front of my perfectly tailored black coat. I walk down the center aisle of the courtroom. The heavy wooden doors swing open for me. I step out into the grand marble corridor of the federal building, my heels clicking softly against the floor. I push through the main exit doors and step out onto the wide stone stairs of the courthouse. The midday sun is blindingly bright. A warm, crisp breeze sweeps across the plaza, carrying the fresh scent of the city. I stand at the top of the stairs, looking out over the bustling streets below. I take a long, deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean air. I am completely untouched by the wreckage. I am financially secure, my own meticulous investments hidden safely away from the blast radius of the DuPont collapse. I am completely, utterly free. I step off the stairs and walk into my new life, leaving the ghosts of the DuPont family locked away in the dark behind me. 6 months have passed since the heavy oak doors of the St. Regis Ballroom were kicked open by federal boots. The heavy, oppressive heat of the Atlanta summer has finally broken, replaced by the crisp, golden light of autumn. I stand on the sweeping master balcony of the estate that Marcus used to claim as his sovereign territory. The estate that my forensic accounting, my ironclad legal maneuvering, and the federal asset forfeiture exemptions secured as entirely legally and cleanly mine. The towering marble columns gleam in the morning sun, scrubbed completely free of the toxic DuPont legacy. Down on the sprawling, manicured lawn below, Zuri is running. She is not wheezing. She is not pale. She is not hooked up to a breathing monitor or trapped in a sterile, terrifying hospital room. She is the picture of absolute radiant health. She chases a golden retriever puppy across the bright green grass, her laughter ringing through the ancient oak trees. It is a bright, clear, beautiful sound. It is the sound of a generational curse being completely, permanently shattered. I lean against the cool, wrought iron railing, holding a porcelain cup of black coffee. The porcelain is warm against my palms. I take a slow, deep sip, letting the profound, absolute silence of the property wash over me. The suffocating weight of Vivian's judgment is gone. The cold, calculated cruelty of Marcus is gone. The sprawling mansion is no longer a gilded cage, it is a fortress. It is my fortress. My phone buzzed violently against the metal railing, vibrating with incoming urgency. I glanced down at the caller ID. It is a heavily encrypted, secure Washington, D.C. number. I do not rush. I set my coffee cup down with deliberate care and answer on the third ring. Agent Sterling, I say, my voice smooth and perfectly level. Mrs. DuPont, he replies. A brief pause hangs on the encrypted line. Or should I say Ms. Vance now? Ms. Vance is fine, I reply, keeping my gaze fixed on Zuri as she tumbles into the soft grass, giggling wildly. To what do I owe the pleasure, agent? The trial concluded weeks ago. The assets are fully liquidated. The offshore money has been entirely recovered and returned to the federal pension funds. My testimony is complete. That is exactly why I am calling, Sterling says. His voice is strictly professional, but beneath the rigid federal cadence, there is a distinct edge of deep, unwavering respect. The Bureau spent 3 years trying to map Marcus DuPont's offshore shell companies. We threw our best forensic accountants at his ledgers, and we hit a brick wall every single time. You did it in 6 months. You untangled a $50 million financial labyrinth from a laptop in your bedroom, all while playing the role of a subdued, obedient housewife. I say nothing. I simply listen to the wind rustling through the oak leaves. The Department of Justice has a very specific, very highly funded division. Sterling continues, the gravity of his offer settling heavily over the line. We hunt white-collar criminals who think their exorbitant wealth makes them completely invisible. We hunt the elite, the untouchables, the people who operate exactly like Marcus and Vivian DuPont. But we need people who fundamentally understand how they think. We need people who know exactly how to read the negative space in a fraudulent ledger, how to trace the dirty money through the clean accounts, and how to anticipate their desperation. Sterling takes a breath. I am authorized by the director to offer you a permanent, highly lucrative consulting contract with the DOJ. We want you on our task force. We want you to do exactly what you did to your husband, but on a national scale. I look down at the sprawling, peaceful grounds of my home. I think of Marcus currently trading his bespoke suits for an oversized jumpsuit, staring down 2 decades, surrounded by concrete and steel. I think of Vivian stripped of her diamonds and her dignity, sitting alone in a cramped, foul-smelling apartment, listening to the roar of highway traffic instead of a string quartet. I think of Jasmine, forcefully humbled, standing under the harsh fluorescent lights of a discount grocery store, apologizing to angry customers just to survive. Zuri is safe. She is entirely provided for. The trust funds I established are completely untouchable, but the world is still heavily populated by men exactly like Marcus. The world is still full of women exactly like Vivian, people who firmly believe their bank accounts give them the divine right to crush anyone breathing beneath them, people who build empires on the broken backs of the innocent. A slow, dangerous, and incredibly powerful smile spreads across my face. Send over the contract, Agent Sterling. I say, my voice ringing with absolute chilling certainty. I will have my legal team review the terms by tomorrow morning. I look forward to working with you, Ms. Vance, he says. The line clicks dead. I lower the phone, placing it flat on the wrought iron table. I look out over the rolling hills of the estate, breathing in the sweet, clean autumn air. They wanted me broken. They wanted me quiet, submissive, and entirely erased. They wanted me to burn in the fires of their ambition and quietly fade into ash so they could continue their reign of uninterrupted greed. But they forgot the fundamental rule of fire. I did not just survive the fire. I became the absolute architect of the inferno. I controlled the flames, I directed the heat, I let it consume the wrought, and I walked out of the ashes completely untouched. The generational curse of the DuPont family is permanently shattered, buried under the heavy steel of federal prison bars, the bleak, suffocating reality of low-income housing, and the harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights of a discount grocery store. They are rotting in the exact hell they built for themselves. I am standing in the light. Zuri looks up at the balcony from the lawn. She waves her small, chubby hand at me, her face glowing with pure, unadulterated joy. I pick up my coffee cup and raise it toward her, the diamond-free fingers of my left hand catching the brilliant morning sun. I smile. It is a triumphant, untouchable, and utterly victorious smile.